Very good afternoon to all of you. Am I audible? Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Audible, sir.
Okay. So we'll start from where we have left yesterday. Yesterday we discussed about the concept of risk, both pertaining to banking and insurance business. We find out the different risks which happen in banking business as well as in insurance business. So today we'll go on to discuss about the different risks which are supposed to be insurable. So from the insurance point of view, what risks are there which the insurance companies are supposed to undertake? We'll have an overview regarding to this. But before that, one thing we need to be clear about is that whenever we go to discuss about the risks in insurance, two major concepts we need to be familiar with before that. And the concepts basically are in the form of a peril and in the form of a hazard. As you know that in financial sense, risk basically refers to a situation where there is a possibility of loss. And in the business of insurance, it is the possibility of loss which accentuates the need for insurance. Therefore, on the part of the insurer, it is required to estimate the possibility of loss or probability of loss accurately. If the insurance companies accurately estimate the possibility of loss, then the insurance company gains. And if the estimation of possibility of loss is wrong or has gone wrong, then the company may have to face loss or even liquidation. Therefore, while trying to estimate the loss, the insurance company needs to be familiar with the different causes of loss. And the different causes of loss are categorized under two heads. One is your peril, one is your hazard. Peril, in simple terms, basically is been defined as the immediate cause of loss or the contingency for which the loss has occurred. The possible occurrences because of which there is a possibility of loss, which are basically in the form of natural calamities like flood, fire, etc. These are considered to be the perils, and we need to insure our assets against these perils. So, for the purpose of insurance, the presence of a peril is a must. Coming to hazards basically are the conditions which accentuates the severity of loss. Or you can say that it is a condition that increases the chance of loss. And accordingly, whenever the insurance companies want to estimate the possibility of loss, they need to understand about the hazard. Because hazard ultimately will result in increasing the possibility of loss. And in that case, the insurance company, while trying to compensate the loss, it will have to face with severe financial burden. Now, coming to the different types of risk in insurance which are supposed to be insurable. I am going to share a slide with you where I have already written the different types of risks which are supposed to be insurable, and we'll go on to discuss one by one. Is it visible? Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Now, talking about the different types of risks in insurance, we need to be familiar with those risks which are supposed to be insurable. That means these are the different types of risks to which the assets are being exposed. The asset might either be in the form of life assets or in the form of non-life assets. So whatever assets are there, the assets are supposed to be exposed to these kind of risks which we are going to discuss. And against these type of risks, the insurance for the assets are basically being taken. So the various types of risks that can be covered by insurance policies are as follows. The first one is a pure risk. Pure risk generally refers to the risk where there is a possibility of loss or no loss. I am repeating the word possibility of loss or no loss. Here, I have not mentioned the word gain. That means the risk where there is no possibility of gain, but there is only possibility of loss or no loss. Then that kind of risk is your pure risk. That means either on the happening of the risk, the loss will occur, or if the risk does not happen, no loss will happen. You will be as where you were before the loss. These kind of risk, pure risk, are supposed to be insurable. So, because here, since there is no possibility of gain, that is the reason why pure risks are supposed to be insurable. And pure risk basically involves certain events which are beyond the control of the insured. And this pure risk has uncertain events. If you look at the examples of pure risk, you can find that pure risk include natural disaster, accident, premature death, disability, etc. So if the risks are in such forms, are in the form of any natural disaster like earthquake, flood, or in the form of accident, or in the form of death, the that risk can be insurable. So you can insure your life against accidents, you can insure your life against premature death, you can insure your life against disability, you can insure your assets against natural disasters like that. It also includes the theft. So pure risk is a risk where there is no of gain, rather where there is a possibility of loss or no loss. This pure risk can take three different forms. One such form is your personal risk. One such form is your uh, public risk, and one such form is your property risk. Personal risk, property risk, and public risk. These three types of risks are coming under the category of pure risk. The pure risk, if is in the form of personal risk, it means those kind of pure risks are related to only individuals concerned. That means that is applicable only to that person, not to the masses in general. Like the risk of premature death, risk of disability, these are considered to be personal risks. Coming to property risks are those where there is a possibility that on happening of the risk, there will be a damage to the physical property. If there will occur some damage to the physical property, then we can say that the risk for which such damage occurs, that risk is in the form of property risk. Public risk, basically considered as liability risk in insurance business. We generally call it as the third party risk. So because of the negligence of one individual or because of the negligence of one asset, if there occurs any damage or any injury to the other person or to the assets of other person, then that will come under the liability risk. So these three are considered to be part of pure risk. So since pure risks are insurable, therefore property risk, personal risk, and public risk are also supposed to be insurable. Then coming to the next kind of risk, which are discussed in the business of insurance, is your speculative risk. Speculative risk is just opposite to pure risk. And speculative risk generally refers to the risk where there is a possibility of either loss or a gain. So here, because of happening of such risk, either loss can occur and at the same time, gain can also occur. Because the gain factor is involved in speculative risk, therefore, the speculative risk is not supposed to be insurable. So generally, it involves the situation where there is a possibility of both loss and gain, and they are not typically insurable. Examples of speculative risk basically include when we go to invest in stock market, you cannot insure your share. So that value fall down will be compensated with the loss by the insurance company. So that will not happen.
Sorry, sir.
Yeah.
Sorry, sir. Disturb. Sir, ଏବେ ଆପଣ କଣ ପଢଉଛନ୍ତି କି ମୁଁ ଲେଟ୍ ରେ ଜଏନ୍ କରି ଜାଣି ପାରୁନି କଣଟା ପଢଉଛନ୍ତି?
Risk and claims management class is going on.
ହଁ BAL କ୍ଲାସ୍ ହେଉଛି ତ ମାନେ ଏବେ କୋଉ ଟପିକ ଉପରେ ପଢା ହଉଛି? Different types of
Topic
risks of
I am discussing about the different types of risks in insurance.
particular sir କୋଉ ପଏଣ୍ଟ ଟା ହିଁ ପଢଉଛନ୍ତି ଏବେ?
ଇଏ ହଉଛି ନା
I am talking about the speculative risk.
Sir, again?
ଏଟା କ୍ୟାନ୍ସଲ କରିଦେଲି
Speculative risk, point 2.
अरे कि म्यूट करो
ପୁରା
I
କଟନ
have shared the screen. The second point is speculative risk. I am just talking about that.
ମୁଁ ଇଏ କରିଦେଲି କ୍ୟାନ୍ସଲ କରିଦେଇଛି ଠିକ
ଅଦର ପିଲାଙ୍କର ଭଏସ ସାର୍ ଶୁଣା ଯାଉଛି କିଛି ବି ଶୁଣା ଯାଉନି
ପୁରା ମରି ଯାଉଛି କଣ ଲାଭ କଣ ସୂତାଟା ଭଲ ନା ଇଏ ବି ଭଲ ଇଏ ବି ଖରାପ ଇଏ ତାଠୁ ଇଏ ସିଏ ତ 300 କେତେ ଲେଖା ଇଏ ତ 450 500
ପ୍ରାଚୀ ପ୍ଲିଜ ମ୍ୟୁଟ yourself
Mute yourself, please. All. So we are talking about the speculative risk, and I said that speculative risk is that kind of risk where there is a possibility of loss as well as there is a possibility of gain. And because of the involvement of the gain factor, the speculative risks are not supposed to be insurable. And the examples of speculative risk which I discussed with you is basically investment in the stock market, starting a business venture, or gambling. So these kind of things are not supposed to be insured. Then comes the static risk. We also call the static risk as the fundamental risk, and it is basically a risk which does not change with the change in time and can be accurately predicted based on historical data. And static risks basically are being related to the happening of certain events which are definitely to happen. Like
ସେଥିପାଇଁ ତ ମତେ ଆଜି ଲାଗିଲା ହେଲେ ମୁଁ ତମକୁ ସବୁ ଦେଖେଉଛି ଅଛି କଣ ମତେ ଦେଖି ତମେ କଣ କହିଛ ଏଇଟା ମୋର ତାକୁ ଇଏ କରୁଥିଲୁ ସରିଲା ନା
mute yourself, please.
ପୁରା ମିଛ କଥା କହୁଛି ନା ମାର୍କଟା ହ୍ୟାଲୋ
Please mute yourself while the class is going on. It is disturbing. Kindly mute yourself all. So talking about static risk, as I said to you, this is a risk which goes on, which do not change with the change in time, and which can be accurately predicted based on historical data. And these static risks are supposed to be to involve those events which are supposed to happen at any point of time. You just cannot deny the happening of such events. So the examples of static risk include the property damage from fire, theft, or vandalism. Because at what point of time fire will occur, you are not sure. And the occurrence of fire is not dependent on the time period. With the change in time, the occurrence of fire will not change. The occurrence of theft will not change. That's why these are considered to be static risks, and these static risks are supposed to be insurable. Because these risks will definitely happen, but at what point of time it will happen, we do not know that. That's why the static risk is insurable. Then comes the dynamic risk. It is just the opposite of static risk, whereby dynamic risk includes the risk which goes on changing with the change in time, and it is influenced by various factors such as technological advancement, economic conditions, changes in consumer behavior. So with the change in consumer behavior, with the change in technology, with the change in economic conditions, the occurrence of this risk can change. So they are more difficult to predict, and therefore the dynamic risks are not supposed to be insurable. Examples of dynamic risk is basically including the changes in market conditions, the fluctuations in the interest rate, emerging risks associated with new technologies and new industries. So such risks are not supposed to be insurable, dynamic risk, because it goes on changing with the change in time. So it is not possible on the part of the insurer to predict properly whether this risk will happen or not. It is very difficult to predict. So static risk is insurable, but dynamic risk is non-insurable. Pure risk is insurable, speculative risk is non-insurable. Then comes particular risk. Particular risk basically refers to the risk which is attached with individual. Therefore, it is otherwise known as your individual risk, and the happening of such risk goes on to affect one particular individual, one specific individual or entity, and it is unique in their circumstance. So, particular risk is individual specific, and particular risk, since is individual specific, so to whatever risk the individual, either as a person or as an entity, is being exposed to, those risks will come under the category of particular risk. And it means the happening of such risk will affect only one specific individual, one specific person in a person or one specific business entity. Examples of particular risk basically refers to personal health issues. So whatever personal health issues you do have, it's not that, or it's not mandatory that I do have that same health problem. My health condition is different from that of yours. So you might have to take the health insurance against the risk to which your health is exposed to, and I will have to take the health insurance against the risk to which my health is exposed. Similarly, property damage, because of suppose any natural disaster in one particular geographical location, the properties might get damaged, but in other geographical locations where the natural disaster has not happened, it will not affect the properties in those geographical locations. So property damage, liability, these are considered to be the particular risk, and particular risks are considered to be insurable because they involve events that are specific to the insured, and it may not affect others in the same way. On the happening of the particular risk, only one individual, only one business entity might have to be affected. The particular risk is insurable. Corresponding to particular risk, we have the fundamental risk. Fundamental risk basically refers to the risk which affects the masses in general. And generally, it affects a large number of individuals or large number of entities. And it is generally considered to be beyond the control of any single individual. They involve the events that are external to the insured and have widespread impact. Okay. So fundamental risk in some cases are insurable, but in many cases it is not insurable. Another type of risk is your financial risk, and financial risk basically refers to the risk which involves some monetary value. So on happening of those risks, if loss occurs, that loss can be quantified in monetary terms. That is considered to be financial risk. And since it can be quantified in monetary terms, that's why it can be estimated, the loss can be estimated or loss can be predicted. That is the reason why financial risk is also supposed to be insured. So it refers to basically the possibility of financial loss or uncertainty due to changes in market conditions. And these risks are considered to be insurable through various types of insurance products and instruments. The financial risk basically includes the investment risk, the credit risk, the currency risk. Because of fluctuations in the exchange rate, there will be a currency risk and you might have to face it now. Similarly, because of any changes in the credit portfolio, you might have to face with loss. Suppose as a banking institution, you have given loans to some persons and they fail to repay the loan. So as a bank, you will have to face with loss because of non-repayment of loan. Therefore, the banks normally try to insure the loan. So these are considered to be the financial risk. Apart from financial risk, we also have non-financial risk, whereby the non-financial risk involves the risk where the loss arising out of happening of the risk is not quantifiable in monetary terms. Basically, non-financial risk includes the risk of loss due to affection, due to love, due to trust. These kind of things are supposed to be non-financial. Suppose you have a pet dog with you, you have some pet animal with you, and on the death of that pet animal, you might go into a fast for 2 days or for 3 days. So that is your personal loss because you are emotionally attached to that pet, and on the demise of that pet, you cannot control yourself. Therefore, non-financial risk basically comes out of love and affection. Since it is not quantifiable in monetary terms, so non-financial risk is not supposed to be insured. So, while going through all the kinds of risk, we found that it is the pure risk, static risk, particular risk, and financial risk which are supposed to be insured. So, at the time of accepting the insurance proposal form, when the insurance company is supposed to estimate the probability of loss, the first and foremost thing it has to do is to identify whether the risk being involved in the policy proposal belongs to any of these categories of risk or not, whether it is belonging to pure risk or static risk or financial risk or particular risk. Now the next part is basically about a concept which we call as the risk identification. That means we need to know why does this arise. We have already pointed out the fact that risk is inherent in business. Risk is inherent with individuals and risk is inherent with insurance business. But we need to find out why does risk arise? Why there is the possibility of risk for which there will be a possibility of loss. So talking about why risk arises, we can say that there are certain factors which are responsible for causing risk. What those factors are, we want to discuss it one by one. The first such factor for which risk arises is your uncertainty. We know that without uncertainty about the future event, there will be no risk. For happening of risk, the presence of uncertainty is a must. So generally we call that risk generally arises due to uncertainty about future events, uncertainty about outcomes or results, or uncertainty about conditions. Factors which generally involve the fluctuations in the market, technological advancements, regulatory changes, natural disasters, all these factors contribute to uncertainty, and all these factors also help in increasing the likelihood of the occurrence of risk. So the first factor responsible for causing risk is your uncertainty. It means without uncertainty, risk is not there. For risk to happen, there has to be the presence of uncertainty. It is because of the fact that the future is completely uncertain, or we are uncertain about certain future outcomes, certain future conditions, certain future events. That's why risk is there. The second factor for which risk arises is your complexity. Complexity generally involves the complex system, the complex processes of the complex environment, where a number of factors are interrelated to each other, or where a number of variables interact with each other. But they are in a complex process, they are in a complex system. And the complex system is basically prone to unexpected interactions, or prone to failures, or prone to disruption. All these things will ultimately lead to various types of risk. So because there is complexity, maybe complexity in relations, maybe complexity in interaction, maybe complexity in environment, or maybe complexity in processes. Because of that, the risk will definitely arise. So complexity is the second factor which causes risk, or for which the risk arises. Third is change. You know that change is the only truth. And with the passage of time, change has to occur. And because of this change factor, the risk arises. So risk generally emerges from changes. Changes in what? Changes in both internal and external factors that affect either individuals or organizations or projects. If you find that in the work environment changes are supposed to happen, then that change the landscape, all these changes can be able to create new risks, or they can alter the existing risk profile. So only because change is the only constant, and change has to occur. It is the only truth. That's why, because of this change, the risk arises. If change had not been there, the risk would not have been there. Then comes another factor which we call as the interdependency. It is somewhere related to the complexity factor also. And generally risk arises because of interdependency. If you are dependent on another person, and if any adverse thing happens with that person, you will also be affected. That's why risk arises. So risk arises from interconnectedness or interdependencies between different elements of a system or organization or supply chain. As a business person, for production purposes, you require raw material. For that, you are dependent upon the supplier. You require labor. For that, you are dependent on the labor union. So any adverse thing that might happen with the labor union will also affect your production process. Any mishappening being done by the suppliers of raw material will ultimately affect your production process. If you are heavily dependent upon your customers, heavily dependent upon technology, any failure in the technology can lead to a risk, which ultimately will result in a loss. So dependencies on suppliers, partners, customers, infrastructure, technology, and regulatory framework increases the potential for risk to propagate and impact multiple stakeholders. So it is because of the interdependencies among different entities, different individuals, that the concept of risk arises. If no interdependencies had been there, the risk would not have been there. Then risk arises also because of some human factors. As you know, the behavior of individuals, the decision-making ability of individuals, the actions of individuals, the errors and omissions done by the individuals, all these basically influence the risk. If you neglect something, risk will happen. Suppose you are driving a car. So any sort of negligence by you while driving will lead to the possibility of accident. So there the risk arises. If incompetence is there, suppose you have hired certain employees, but they are not competent enough to carry out your business, then your business will have to face with loss because of the incompetence of the person whom you have employed. Suppose there are some dishonest people who are supposed to do some fraud with the company. You are not aware about them. So because of their dishonesty, because of the fraud that they are supposed to make, you will have to face with loss as a business concern. So all these factors together constitute the human factor. So the human behavior, human decisions, human actions, human errors, all these things influence the risk. Because of this, the risk arises. Then comes certain external events. External events, as you know, basically are the events which are beyond the control of individuals or organizations. Like the event of natural disaster, like flood or earthquake or hurricane, or the events like war-like situations. If war occurs between two countries, automatically all the people living in the country will have to be affected. Or the events like economic downturn, if there occurs any sort of, you can say that recession in the country, so that will lead to unemployability, that will lead to less production, or events like pandemics that we have faced in 2020 and 2021. So that these things are beyond the control of individuals, beyond the control of the organization. Because of the pandemic, you had already witnessed how much loss we have suffered with. So these are considered to be the external events which results in the emergence of risk. And in today's world, since we are much more dependent on technology, you can also highlight the cyber attack as one of the external factors which can lead to the possibility of risk. So these are some of the factors which generally result in the emergence of risk. We discussed about the factors like uncertainty, factors like complexity, factors like change, interdependencies, human factors, and external factors. Then once you are clear about why such risk arises, and you are clear about how these risks can be categorized, you are familiar with the different types of risks which are supposed to be insurable, the next best thing which confronts you is to find out a solution for this. What to do with this? What will do with the risk? What the insurance company will do with the risk? Because while insuring yourself or insuring your assets against the risks we have discussed, the insurance company will ultimately undertake those risks. It will ultimately underwrite those risks. And while underwriting, the insurance company must have to be prepared with certain risk management techniques, certain risk management measures. So once the risks are being identified, once the factors which result in the emergence of risk have been found, the next thing is to deal with the question, what to do with the risk. Now, when we have been confronted with this question, what to do with that, with the risk to which we are being exposed to, we generally have to come out with a plan. A plan. We call it as a risk management plan. We need to manage those risks. We mean, I am here implying the insurance company or the insurance. They need to manage those risks. How do they manage the risk? Once they have identified the risk, once they have found out the factors which result in the emergence of risk, once they have categorized the risk under different categories to find out whether they are insurable or not, then the insurance companies have to come out with a proper risk management plan. So the question of what to do with risk basically involves the adoption of a proper risk management plan, which basically involves certain steps. And the first step in the risk management plan is your risk identification. For managing risk, initially or at the first hand, the insurance company needs to identify and assess them systematically. Identification of risk involves to identify the potential risk, whether it is coming under the category of pure risk or not. If so, then whether it is coming under the category of personal risk or property risk or public risk, then they will handle it. So the risk identification in the entire risk management plan involves identifying potential risks, analyzing their causes, consequences, and the likelihood of occurrence, and documenting relevant information to inform decision making. Likelihood of occurrence means the frequency of loss they will have to assess. Consequences means they will have to assess the severity of loss. Once risk is being identified in the risk management plan, the second step in the risk management plan is the assessment of risk. So once risks are identified, they should be assessed to determine their potential impact on objectives. Risk assessment basically involves the evaluation of the likelihood and severity of risk, then prioritizing them based on their significance and determining the appropriate level of risk. So the second important step that the insurers in the risk management plan have to take is to properly assess the risk once they identify the risk. Then the third step is risk mitigation. So after assessment, they are now clear what will be the severity of loss, what will be the frequency of loss, what will be the variance of loss. All these things they have come out in the risk assessment step. After that, they will be involved in the risk mitigation. That means minimization of. So risk mitigation basically involves the measures which the insurance company needs to implement to reduce the likelihood or impact of identified risk. So to reduce the frequency of risk, to reduce the severity of risk, the risk mitigation measures have to be taken by the insurance company. Where the risk mitigation may include implementing controls, safeguards, preventive measures, redundancies, and contingency plans to minimize the probability of risk. So, in the risk mitigation stage, actually the insurer tries to minimize the happening of risk, as a result of which, if the risk in case occurs, the loss will also be minimized, which will not pose any sort of financial burden on the insurance companies when they will go on to compensate for the loss. The fourth step is your risk transfer, and risk transfer basically involves shifting the financial burden of risk to third parties. If the insurance company finds that the risk is very high and it is not possible on the part of the insurance company to solely compensate the loss which might arise because of the risk, so then they can think of transferring a part of that risk to some other insurance company. We generally call it as the reinsurance process, and risk transfer involves the shifting of the financial burden from one insurance company to another insurance company by the original insurance company. Here the insured doesn't have to bother about anything. It is the original insurer who will have to shift the financial burden to any third party, like any other insurance company. Then another step is your risk avoidance. It also arises after the risk assessment is done. Once you have assessed the risk, then you can come out with certain measures, certain steps, certain tools through which you can avoid the happening of the risk. Although you cannot fully avoid the happening of risk, but in a major way, you can take some controlling measures through which you can avoid the happening of those risks. So risk avoidance basically involves eliminating or avoiding activities, processes, or situations that pose significant risk or offer little potential benefit. It means if as an insurance company you find that the risk factor is very much high, and if that risk will occur, it will eventually lead to a huge loss, it will not be possible on your part as an insurance company to compensate for the loss. You can go on to avoid that. You must have gone through the fact in case of life insurance. Normally, the life insurance companies do not try to cover the insurance for the life of those who have attained the age of 60 or more, because they know that the risk of death in case of those persons who have attained the age of 60 or more is very high. Anything can happen at any point of time. So they normally try to avoid that. Yeah. Similarly, the health insurance companies also do not agree, or generally they hesitate to provide health insurance facilities to those who have aged. Those who have aged 55 or more or 60 or more, generally the health insurance companies hesitate to provide them the health insurance benefits. If the health insurance companies provide them, then it will cost a lot for the insured. So, by identifying as well as by assessing the risk, the insurance companies can take some controlling measures in the form of risk avoidance. They can go on to avoid risk. So, basically, this risk avoidance involves refraining from engaging in high risk activity, discounting products or services, exiting markets, or business lines with unfavorable risk profile. Then risk acceptance, that means the company will go on to accept the risk. If the company feels that whatever risk has been identified by it, has been assessed by it, it is possible on the part of the company to compensate for the loss which might result because of happening of that risk, then they will go on to accept it. So risk acceptance basically involves acknowledging the existence of risk and consciously deciding not to take any action to mitigate or transfer it. The company on its own is able to provide for compensation towards the loss that might result from the happening of the risk. Then the next step is monitoring and review. Continuous monitoring and review must have to be done by the insurance company. So once the risks are being identified and assessed, and once you have taken some risk controlling measures in the form of risk transfer or risk avoidance or risk acceptance, the next step on the part of the insurance company is the risk management plan is to continuously monitor the risk and review. Because through review mechanism, you can come out with some corrective measures from time to time basis. So since risk management is supposed to be an ongoing process, so it requires continuous monitoring and review as well as adjustment. Organizations regularly monitor these factors, reassess their risk profile, evaluate the effectiveness of risk management strategies, and adapt their approaches as circumstances change. Clear? So these are the things which are supposed to be coming under the category of what to do with risk. Then come the sources of risk in insurance. As we have already pointed out, the business of insurance can either be in the form of life or in the form of non-life insurances. So there can be different sources from which the risk can be identified. So sources of risk in insurance basically refers to the sources from where you can identify the risk. And if you look at the sources, there can be various sources, and the major source is nothing but the proposal form itself. Whenever a proposed insured is fulfilling the proposal form and giving it to the insurance company for acceptance purposes, the insurance company, by going through the proposal form, where a number of information have been disclosed by the proposed insured, by looking at those information, the insurance company can be able to identify the risks which are attached to it relating to that policy proposal. But apart from that, there are some key sources of risk in insurance. I have already pointed out here 4 things. One is your underwriting risk. Underwriting at the time of underwriting or at the time of undertaking the risk, the insurance company can identify whether the risk is insurable or not. And underwriting risk basically involves the selection risk. Selection here basically refers to 2 types of selection. One is your anti-selection and adverse selection. Anti-selection means selling your insurance policies to those who are having a higher likelihood of making claims. And anti-selection means charging lesser premium from those who are supposed to pay higher premium. So at the time of selection of risk or at the time of underwriting the risk, the insurance company can select the risk. On the basis of selection, they will have to look after whether the selection involves anti-selection or adverse selection. Because in case of anti-selection or adverse selection, there is a possibility of huge loss on the part of the insurance company. Similarly, underwriting risk also involves the pricing risk. Pricing, as you know, pricing of insurance policies is basically in the form of premium. So at the time of fixing the premium, as I told you, if those who are supposed to pay high premium, you charge them with low premium, then that will definitely lead to a huge. Or if those who are supposed to pay less premium are being charged with high premium, it will also result in higher risk. So pricing risk is also a part of underwriting risk. At the time of pricing the policy, the insurance company can identify the risk. Similarly, moral hazard. Basically, moral hazard is related to the risk in which basically moral hazard basically involves the reckless behavior or carelessness attitude of the individual. If the individual is suppose known of the fact that insurance is there, what will happen? If loss occurs, insurance company will give me. So intentional, if you do something, then automatically it will result in a huge loss. That is considered to be the moral hazard. So that also comes under the category of underwriting risk. So at the time of underwriting risk, the risk, the insurance company can be able to identify the risk to which the proposal is being exposed to which the assets are being exposed to which the individuals are being exposed to. Another source of risk is the processing error or the cyber risk. So that is also another source. If with the increasing digitization of insurance operations, cyber risk have become a significant concern. And because of cyber threats such as hacking or data breaches, uh, it all basically can result in compromising sensitive information, and this leads to disruption of business operations, which ultimately will result in a huge financial loss. So you need to take care of that at the time of uh, selling your policy. Then market risk and reinsurance risk. So these will come under the category of sources of risk. But one thing we need to clear that the major source is nothing but the policy proposal. Apart from that, in case of life insurances, it is the medical examiner's report, which also is considered to be another source of another source from where you can identify the risk. Apart from that, the report to be furnished by the insurance agent or report to be furnished by the insurance development officer, that also constitutes another source of risk. And all these things which I had already mentioned in the slide, these are considered to be the different sources of risk. So in this way, your first unit is being covered. Tomorrow we'll start with the second unit. Is it okay?
सर गोटे सेकेंड
हाँ कुह
सर प्रीवियस क्लास रे कोन पढ़ा हैतिला खाली बस जस्ट ओवरऑल टिके कहि देबे कि माने
In the last class, we just had a discussion regarding the importance of risk in both banking and insurance business. We also discussed about the risk inherent in banking and the risk inherent in insurance. And we also discussed about how the banking company and the insurance company
हाउ
can
दो बैंकिंग
banking companies and insurance companies can
ओके सर
manage the risk. We just had an overall discussion regarding all these areas. Today, we focused more on the risk in insurance. We discussed about the different types of risk which are supposed to be insurable. We discussed about why risk arises. We discussed about the after we identify why risk arises, what to do with the risk. Then we discussed about the sources of risk and also the risk management plan. In this way, your first unit is over. Tomorrow we'll start with the second unit. Your second unit covers some portion of the first unit also. And major portion of the second unit is about the claims management. It basically covers 4 areas: health insurance, property insurance, cattle insurance, and agricultural insurance. So tomorrow we'll go on to discuss about those. Is it okay?
ओके सर थैंक यू
Thank you.
ଆଜ୍ଞା ଗୁଡ୍ ନାଇଟ୍। ଆଜି ଯାଉନି ଖାଇବାକୁ ଭଲ ଲାଗୁନି ଜର ଟିକେ ହେଇଯାଇଛି ତ ସେଥିପାଇଁ ଖାଇବାକୁ ଇଚ୍ଛା ହଉନି ଏତେ। ଆଜ୍ଞା ହଁ ଗରମ ଥଣ୍ଡାରେ ଥଣ୍ଡା ଜର ହେଇଯାଇଛି।
ଲାଗୁଛି କେତେ ବାର